So if you have teens that are interested in creative art projects, have them come on down Wednesdays at normally 4 o'clock, but this Wednesday it's noon. Yeah. All right, let's bless our children together. Child of light, we love you and bless you. We see the Spirit of God within you, guiding, protecting, and prospering you always. Isn't that the truth? I know many of you have, I now have a grandniece, which is like, Ashley's like my daughter that I never had, so Sienna is my grandchild that I'm never going to have, but it's so exciting, isn't it? And Jim and Carol, you just got back from meeting your 2-year-old great-grandson. Great-great-grandson. Yay. So let's give that. Yay. All right. So we all have children in our hearts and a desire to bless them in every way. All right. Speaking of, today we're going to talk about living your most extraordinary, having the guts to be extraordinary. But before that, there was an elderly couple named Bill and Helen, and they went to the county fair every year. And one year a man was giving helicopter rides for $50. And having never been in a helicopter before, Bill begged Helen, to take the ride. And she refused, quipping, $50 is $50. So the following year, the man was there again, and Bill begged for a ride. And again, Helen turned it down, saying, $50 is $50. So the third year, same conversation, except this time, the pilot overheard them talking. And he offered the couple a free ride, but with one condition. They must not make a sound while in the air, or they would have to pay the $50. And Bill and Helen agreed to climb on board. So as soon as they left the ground, the pilot began performing all of these hair-raising maneuvers in the air. But try as he might, he couldn't get the couple to utter one word. And when they finally touched back down, the pilot turned to Bill and exclaimed, "That was an amazing show of self-control. You have earned your free ride." And Bill replied, "Well, I nearly said something when Helen fell out. But $50 is $50. Right there. That's those husband and wife things, isn't it? All right, so I was supposed to talk about healing with your father today, but I tried to, some sermons are easier than others, and I have a past sermon like that, and I got it out, and it was so boring, I just couldn't dress it up, so I changed it to having the guts to be extraordinary. That's what we're going to talk about today. And when we get into, in August, I'm going to talk about, the Fillmore's birthdays were both in August, and we always need to review once a year, what is unity? What do we believe? How did we get here? What's our history? So August, except for August 13th, is Humor Sunday. All of you watching online, welcome, and I invite you to come personally to the sanctuary because it's going to be so much fun. But the rest of August will be about the Fillmores, and then I want to continue with this having the guts to be extraordinary in September. So that's what's coming in our future Sunday messages. All right. There's a mythical story of a woman who found a folded up, dried up sponge that was really compressed. And she discerned that tucked inside was the message she'd been seeking. So she carried the hardened sponge to the sea, and she waded out waist deep, and she opened up her fist and let the sponge out. And as the sponge unfolded, and came to life in the water, to her amazement, magically, a small fish trapped in sleep in the hardened sponge came alive and swam off out to sea. And from that day forward, no matter where she went, she took that as her answer. She felt every time she thought of that little fish that had so long been asleep in her, she thought of it swimming in the deep. And she let her soul be free from that day forward. Well, the secret of life somehow always has to do with awakening or freeing what's been asleep inside of us, doesn't it? All the stories, when they kiss the princess and she comes to wake, Sleeping Beauty becomes awake. And like the little fish, our soul comes to life when we let it swim free. I mean, haven't you had some experiences in life when just there were no inhibitions? And I don't mean from drinking margaritas. I mean when you knew everything and you were just free and unlimited. I love that song, I'm free, I am unlimited, there are no chains that bind me. So today I want to share a couple of ways that we can fine-tune our consciousness to let our souls swim free in God's universal sea of omnipresent love. You want to swim free in love, the universal love? Wouldn't that be exciting? Having the guts to be extraordinary begins with the spiritual powers of imagination and faith, right? An idea drops in, we catch an inspiration for our lives, for who we truly are, and then faith nurtures it into reality. These two powers, faith and imagination, they move on the divine substance of spirit, and they are what moves the invisible into physical reality, visible physical reality in our life. You first catch the vision, and then you nurture it with your words and your thoughts until it gets a nucleus of formation. Sometimes you write it down as a goal or a dream, which gives it physical presence in the universe that it never had before. Think about that. It was your dream was invisible until the ink flowed out of the pen onto a piece of paper, and that's the first place your dream appears in physical reality oftentimes. That's why they say write your goals, because you're moving it from the invisible divine substance into physical reality. Imagination and faith bring your dreams to life. So what's your dream? A lot of us here are at retirement age, and you can think, been there, done that, had all that. I'm just coasting now. I'm just taking it easy and coasting. But you still have purpose and passion, whether it's inspiring your great-great-grandchild to make a positive influence in their lives. There's purpose and passion in all of us. And can we agree that everything that exists was once just a thought, had its beginning in thought, right? Laptops, smartphones, great art, great novels, great literature, beautiful music, you name it, all was considered once only an idea, or a hope, or a sleeping dream, or even science fiction. It was thought to be impossible, but today it's a reality. I watched a documentary on Steve Jobs, and I was reminded that he was greatly influenced by Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. And his exploration, Steve Jobs' exploration of spirituality, gave him visions that he shared with billions of people, didn't he? Billions of people through his inventions. And isn't it nice to think that there's a little spirituality in your iPhone? A little spirituality in every iPad, When Steve showed up in the computer industry, it was terribly dry and left brain heavy, wasn't it? It was coding and stuff. I remember my freshman year in college, the computers, I went to San Diego State, and the computers there were bigger than this room, and you had to learn coding for them. And I thought, I'm never doing this. I wish I would have, but, to be a coder and a programmer, but it's just so left brain heavy. Steve changed all of that by adding flair and art and beauty and user-friendliness. He went to Stanford University. He was enrolled in Stanford University, but he didn't like it. He didn't like all the academics of his classes. Did you know that? So he said he dropped out of all his academics, and one semester dropped in to a cursive writing calligraphy course. Just audited it, didn't take it. And that's where all the design from Apple came from. Dropping out of academics and dropping into cursive writing, right? Every invention, every intention, every life transformation, every new record, every new song, every great love story, every miraculous healing is brought to life by the awesome powers of imagination and faith. Did you see on the news this week the 93-year-old who climbed up to the top of Half Dome in Yosemite? Did any of you see that? Do you watch the news? I don't know if you do or not. Anyway, he's 93 years old. It's 15, how far is it? I think it's 15 miles up. You know what Half Dome in Yosemite looks like. It's 15 miles up very steep terrain. I can't remember how many days they said it took. He walked it with his son and his granddaughter. And when he got to the top, there was the cameras were there, and there's big celebration. You may not want to scale mountains, but isn't it important to you to have a healthy body? Yes. Isn't it important to live with purpose? To make a meaningful contribution, as I said, to be a loving parent or a grandparent, to positively influence the life of those around you? Can you see that every time you choose inspiration over fear, or inspiration over just coasting, you let your soul swim free? That when you're coasting and you're living in that unconscious realm, I do that. I check out lots of times that I'm just kind of coasting along. But this is the call to call yourself back to what your soul still has to do inside of you. Spirit isn't finished with you yet, right? Can you get excited about awakening Spirit's vision for your life, right? You have a vision, no matter how old you are, until you take your last breath. Their Spirit is inspiring you with meaningful contribution and making a difference. Tammy Keeves is the author, this is the next slide. She's the author of This Time I Dance, and she said, "We are not ridiculous or fragile for believing in love, strength, and exhilarating possibilities. It's not crazy to dedicate ourselves to a life that feels true and empowering and exciting. It's just plain crazy not to." So this morning I want to light a fire under everybody. You know, if you've been coasting, if you've been unsure or questioning about what's next for me, come New Year's, I'm going to launch a series called, I don't know what it's called yet, but it's something about launch your best decade ever, right? What's the next 10 years for you going to hold? And how are you going to manifest that and bring that into possibility? Can you begin to see that having the guts to be extraordinary begins by receiving and then believing in the exhilarating possibilities placed in you by God? There's a beautiful scripture I love, 1 Corinthians 2:12. I have that one up there, part of it anyway. It's a little bit long, but listen to this. "Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is from God, so that we might understand the gifts that have been freely given to us by God." And it's too long to put the rest of it on, but listen, it says, "And we speak of these things in words not taught by human wisdom." When you have a dream, it drops in. And you may not even have, it may just be just a surprise, just an inspiration. You may not even have words to know what it is that's seeking to swim free in you, that's seeking to be born out of you. "And we speak of these things in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit. For the natural man does not receive the things of Spirit." The human intellect, the human self of you doesn't commune at that level with Spirit. You commune in the level of the universal Christ consciousness. "For the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him. Nor can we know them, because they are spiritually discerned." Idea drops in and go, wow, could that be for me? No, I don't think so. Oh, I can't believe that would be possible. Oh, the human intellect is going to argue, but your spirit knows, you feel it in the core of your being. This is true. This is what you have for me, God. I say yes to this. I say yes to this. Several years ago, I was in Spain, and I climbed to the top of a tower in a cathedral. And the climb kind of reminded me of the spiritual path, because it's wide and spacious in the lobby at the bottom, and then has several levels. And every level you go up gets more narrow, right? And every level has fewer people making the trip to the top. Not many people choose to go to the top, because the final stage required us to scrunch over like this and climb under stone overhangs, and at one point even get on your hands and knees to crawl through this little space. But the view at the top, it's spectacular. And from the top, from the highest point, I could gain the perspective of, your soul loves those experiences, doesn't it? Not if you're afraid of heights, but you can, step up on the platform and get the bigger view. And from the lowest level, I could see that it catered to all of the senses of the human self. There was a cafe as I looked down. There's cappuccinos. There was a museum that showed a video of what it looked like from the top. There was a souvenir shop. But I was at the top in the experience, not as an observer watching the experience. I entered into the experience. It makes all the difference. Your soul is calling you to do that, to enter into the experience of a panoramic view for your life. Second scripture that's really related to this morning is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapter 7. And this is an interesting wording when we hear Jesus talk. "We enter the awakened life by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." seems funny to hear Jesus talking about something that's hard, right? The wide gate is the one we pass through when we live from our limitations, our reasons, our excuses to not live an extraordinary life. I'm too old, I'm retired now, I'm just taking it easy, I'm coasting, done all that, I can't do anymore, I really don't want to, I just want to rest. All of that stuff. When we give up expecting the best so we aren't disappointed if something doesn't work out, that's a wide gate, isn't it? When we're afraid to commit to something so we live with nothing, that's a wide gate, isn't it? When we're believing all the good ones are taken, that's a wide gate. When believing you don't have the skill or the education to advance, that's the wide gate. When you try something and you fail and you give up because you feel you're too old or you don't have the energy, that's a wide gate. A lot of people go through those gates. To declare a condition is incurable, that's a wide gate that a lot of people walk through, isn't it? One of the narrow gates that Myrtle Fillmore had to walk through was, I am a child of God, therefore I do not inherit sickness. And she had to hold to that thought and hold to that thought. To declare your soul's dream as impossible is a wide gate, because it's easy to abandon it or to give it up or not give it your all. Instead, you have to know the truth about God and fine-tune your consciousness to take hold of the truth. That's the narrow gate. That's moving up to the higher levels of the universal Christ consciousness. You are God's child, and in you there is no lack, there is only plenty. You are God's child, and in you there is no insufficiency, there's only abundance. You are God's child, and in you there's no lackluster, there's only divine energy and inspiration. You are God's child, and in you there's no incompetence, there's only know-how. And you think you don't know how, but when you get still and you listen, you fire the neural networks in your brain that create and allow more health and more intelligence in your body. When you be still and know that I am God, you're increasing your intelligence. Isn't that amazing? You are God's child, and in you there is no lack of energy, but unlimited inspiration and passion. In you there is no impossibility, only fulfillment. You have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is from God. And those gifts are freely given, freely given. And are you open to receive? You have to ask yourself, am I open to receive? Just say yes to that. Say, I'm open to receive right now. Hand on your heart. I'm open to receive. Right. I'm living an extraordinary life. Together, I'm living an extraordinary life. Jesus said the narrow gate was hard because, listen to this, it's the uncommon choice. Right? Everybody does this. It's what Charles Fillmore called herd consciousness, that all the herd moves this way. But the one that stands out from the herd, that's the one that's moving up through the narrow gate. I don't know that I like the word narrow gate, but up into the ascension of a universal consciousness. Wallace Wattles writes in his book, he says it, I think, in a really good way, The Science of Getting Rich, the proven mental program to a life of wealth. That sounds good, doesn't it? He says, he describes this narrow gate idea, I think, in a way that we can all relate to. He says, to think what you want to think is truth, regardless of appearances. He says, every man and woman, but this is old-time writing, right? So every man has the natural and inherent power to think what he wants to think, but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearances, right? Don't we all know that? You look at the conditions, the x-rays, the tumors, the diagnosis, the unruly child, the uneducated coworker that does everything wrong. To think requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearances. To think according to appearances is easy. To think truth regardless of appearances is laborious. That's where Jesus is saying the way is hard and the gate is narrow. And it requires the expenditure of more power than any other work man is called upon to do. How about that? You're all advanced because you're here in unity and you know this and you're doing the work in consciousness. To think according to appearances is easy. To think truth, regardless of appearances, is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work man is called upon to perform. I think about Myrtle Fillmore with her healing. You know, she cleared out the closet under the stairwell in her house. She put a desk in there and 2 chairs, one for herself and one for Jesus Christ. She put a light in and a Bible. And she went in that closet 8 hours a day to read the Bible and to say, I'll either get well or I'll die. And she stayed in there 2 years, 8 hours a day, and came out healed and lived 46 years more, beyond a 3-month diagnosis of tuberculosis and malaria and a whole host of problems in her body. To think truth, regardless of appearances, is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work man is called upon to perform. He goes on to say, there is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. It is especially true when truth is contrary to appearances, right? And Rosemary Fillmore Ray, the granddaughter of Mr. Fillmore, was friends of mine when I lived in Kansas City. And she used to talk about Charles Fillmore, her grandfather. You know, he'd walk around the house and all of a sudden he'd just be still. And he'd go into the silence. And he'd just stand there. And her little friends were over playing, and they go, what's wrong with your grandfather? And Rosemary said, I always just said, oh, he's in the silence. Like that happened in every person's house, right? So the part I disagree with here, there's no labor from which most people shrink as they do from the sustained and consecutive thought. It's the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearances. I do what Charles Fillmore did. When I'm praying about something, I kind of get a mantra, an idea in my mind, and then I walk around the house and I'm folding laundry and I stop. And I just let myself drop into that space and I affirm the truth. 15 seconds, 30 seconds. And then over here, you know, later on, I'm driving in my car and I'm stopped at a stoplight and I go, and I have 15 seconds of inspiration, of connection, inspiration. One of my favorite authors, Carolyn Leaf, you know, she says when she has her Detoxify Your Brain program, she says it's 5 to 15 seconds, 6 or 7 times a day that rewires our brain and our thinking. So I don't know that it has to be hard, because I've done a couple of things. I've created a couple of things in my life by just walking around and all of a sudden remembering, oh yeah, I'm praying about that, and stopping and allowing Spirit to just move in and through me, surrendered to thank you, God, for this or something better. And then that's how my hole-in-one occurred. I'm working on the second one, as you all know, but I haven't been talking about it as much. All right, here we go. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in mind which observes it, and this can only be prevented by holding the thought of the truth. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind. You see a tumor, you think tumor forms in your mind. And this can only be prevented by holding the thought of truth. To look, and then he gives a couple of examples to make this clear. To look upon the appearance of disease will produce the form of disease in your own mind and ultimately in your body, unless you hold the thought of the truth, which is that there is no disease, it is only an appearance, and the reality is health and life. To look upon appearances of poverty will produce corresponding forms in your own mind and then in your life, unless you hold to the truth that there is no poverty, there is only abundance. To think health when surrounded by appearances of disease, or to think riches when in the midst of appearances of poverty, requires power. The gate is narrow, right? Requires power. But he who acquires this power becomes a mastermind. He can conquer fate. He can have what he wants. This power can only be acquired by getting hold of the very basic fact which is behind all appearances. And that fact is that there is one thinking, universal divine substance from which and by which all things are made. Then we must grasp the truth that every thought held in this divine substance becomes a form. Now held, you can't just, every thought pass through like cars on the freeway. You have to let the car get off the exit ramp. Every thought held in this substance becomes a form, and that man can so impress his thoughts upon it as to cause them to take form and become visible things. Isn't this marvelous? Doesn't it just feed you and nourish you that the way is wide, the gate is wide and the way is easy and a lot of people take it, but the way is narrow. The way is narrow and can be hard. It requires discipline. It requires effort. It requires standing still for a few minutes, 5 to 17 seconds, 6 times or 7 times a day in order to get yourself in the vibration of the answer to your prayer. There is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of a sustained and consecutive thoughts. It's the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearances. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I agree that this power can only be acquired by getting hold of the truth that there is only one power, one presence, one love, God the good. And just affirming that even when you stand still for a few seconds every day. It can be difficult to remember the truth in the face of contrary appearances, can it? Things look so bad. Things look so bad. I remember when my father-in-law was dying with cancer, and I had been at Unity Village taking my licensed teacher classes, and he lived in Iowa, so I drove up to Iowa on the weekends, and I saw him, and he was emaciated. It was not a healthy picture at all. And then I went back down to Unity Village the next week to take classes, and my favorite teacher, Ed Rabel, who was almost reclusive, he'd never answer a question, and he would come into class the second before it started and leave immediately afterwards. You could never ask him anything. But for some reason, he came in early that day and he sat down, and I said, Mr. Rabel, I saw my father-in-law, and he has cancer and it looks so bad. And he said, it is always right to pray for healing. You don't know what form that healing will take, but there is only life. There is only life. And it was very comforting to know that in the face of appearances, it had me, disheveled and distressed. And that word was, there is only life, there is only life, was very helpful. It can be hard to hold to the truth when your family, your friends, your doctors, the experts, the appearances tell you that you have to face the facts. Oh, get real, they'll tell you. Get real. Our faith should not be in the wisdom of others, but in the power of God. And one of our last slides is, there is no hope that ever stirs within you that God has not put the actual fulfillment of that hope already in you. It comes from God. Desire, D-E, of the sire, Father. All desire is of the Father. All desire comes from God. And so there's no hope, no dream that ever stirs within you that God hasn't already put the actual fulfillment of that hope in you. And you are the midwife that gets that perfection from the invisible to the visible of your life so your soul can swim free. Your dream is God-inspired. You do not affirm your dreams to make them true. They're already true inside of you. Yes? To live an extraordinary life, we want to use imagination and faith. We want to receive from Spirit that which is of God, not what's of the world. And we want to know that wherever we go, right up beside us, right within us, right alongside of us, whatever, waiting to be used is all the power of the universe to help us accomplish that dream in ways that the human intellect can't capture. Sometimes it'll capture those ways, but you just open yourself to swim free. And then believe that you're listening to a whole-minded intelligence, a presence of love that is grand, invisible, powerful, loving, and mystical. And take the passage through the narrow gate and follow where it leads, because it will set your soul to swim free. And that's our last slide. I want us to affirm together this morning the truth about, think about your dream. Think about what you're praying. It doesn't have to big scale Yosemite, half dome Yosemite. Whatever it is in your life right now, let's just reaffirm this truth. Together, I commit to listening to a whole-minded intelligence, a presence of love that is grand, invisible, powerful, loving. So I live my most extraordinary life. Can you feel it? Yes. All right. Let's take that for a time of prayer now, for our meditation. Louise Hay has a beautiful word in her You Can Heal Your Life book. And she uses kind of this similar prayer, a prayer similar at the end of each chapter. And I thought this one was so beautiful for our lesson today. Oops. So take a deep breath in. Exhale any tension, stress, or strain. Take a deep breath in and exhale any toxic thoughts. And just be fully present to the presence. Charles Fillmore would say, I am now in the presence of pure being, immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge thy power and presence, O blessed Spirit. And in thy divine wisdom, erase all my human limitations. And from your pure substance of love, bring my world into manifestation according to thy perfect law. And Louise Hay says, in the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. Feel after that. In the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. I believe in a power far greater than I am that flows through me every moment of every day. Now in your imagination, see yourself open at the top of your head. Charles Fillmore prayed that way. Open at the top. And allow the light of divine wisdom to flood in through your being, down through your head, your brain, over your face, your neck, around your shoulders, over your chest, down through your abdomen, your back, your lower extremities, your legs, your feet. Let it curve around and come up the backs of your heels, the backs of your legs, your thighs, your buttocks, your spine, your neck where there's zeal and enthusiasm, back into your brain. See that light infusing your bloodstream, carrying it throughout your body, the life of God, the love of God. I believe in a power far greater than I am that flows through me every moment of every day. I open myself to the wisdom within, knowing that there is only one intelligence in this universe. And out of this one intelligence comes all the answers, all the solutions, all the healings, all the new creations. One intelligence in the universe, one presence, one power, living in you, as you, through you. And it carries with it all the answers to your prayers, all the solutions you're seeking, all the healings, every new creative dream. And letting yourself drop in a little more deeply. I trust this power and intelligence knowing that whatever I need to know is revealed to me, and that whatever I need comes to me in the right time, the right space, and the right sequence. Whatever I need to know is revealed to me, and whatever I need comes to me out of the flow of the divine order of God, out of that one intelligence, that infinite intelligence that lives in me, through me, as me. And so this morning, see yourself with perhaps with your dream, your new inspiration, or something you're praying about. Just visualize yourself in a beautiful cathedral. Maybe that's the Grand Canyon and the Cathedral of Nature. Maybe it's an ancient cathedral in Europe. Pick a place that's inspirational to you, where you're quickened to the presence of God under the umbrella of the great redwood trees. And see yourself standing there, and your hands down at your side and your palms facing upward. Just allow yourself to receive. I trust the power and intelligence of God. Whatever's on your mind, whatever's on your heart, I trust the power and intelligence and the love of God. As you stand there in that stillness, just as Charles Fillmore stood in the silence, whatever you need comes to you in the right time, the right space, the right sequence. And all is well. And you breathe in the life of Spirit gently, gently, gently. Allow yourself to be healed in this moment. Allow yourself to be inspired. Allow yourself to be loved. Allow yourself to feel complete. And then gently, gently let your attention leave that sacred space and come back to our time and place here. In the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. I believe in a power far greater than I am that flows through me every moment of every day. I open myself to the wisdom within, knowing that there is only one intelligence in this universe. Out of this one intelligence comes all the answers, all the solutions, all the healings, all the new creations. I trust it. And all is well in my world. We affirm the same thing for those we love, really for all people everywhere. New grandbabies, grandnieces, great-great-grandchildren, our neighbors, our family, our siblings, our parents. We trust the power and intelligence in them knowing that whatever they need comes to them in the right time, the right space, and the right sequence. And all is well in their world. For this ability to pray for ourselves and to pray for all others, we give thanks now. In the name and the nature of the one who said, Father, I thank you that you hear me, and that you hear me always. And together we all say, Amen.
Good morning. I have 3 poems for you today, and they're all a cappella. The first one is called